Hey everyone, and welcome back to Time with Tim. I'm Andy Carlson, joined by Tim Fletcher. Today we're going to do another Q&A session with questions from our Lift participants and YouTube listeners. And we're diving into a topic that comes up in almost every conversation around recovery: boundaries. Healthy boundaries are the center of healthy relationships. They're a huge key to finding our sanity. And for those of us with complex trauma, boundaries can feel confusing, overwhelming, and sometimes even traumatic themselves or impossible to enforce. I thought that before we jump into some of the main topics, there's a quote I love that we share in our online Lift class from Elizabeth Earnshaw that says, "When people set boundaries with you, it is their attempt to continue the relationship. It's not an attempt to hurt you." Could you elaborate more on the meaning to this and what it means to you?
Yeah. So, what I think a lot of people coming out of complex trauma don't realize is that their family operated off of boundaries. There was rules, there was unspoken rules that everybody knew, but they guided all the interactions, all the behaviors, the relationships, how you responded to certain people. And so they were boundaries, but they were unhealthy. But that was your normal. That's what you grew up with. And so what begins to happen as you are in recovery is you're working towards becoming healthy. And then you realize, well, becoming healthy yourself means I have to work towards healthy relationships as well, because that's part of life. And so this isn't just an individual solo journey now. I've got to interact with people. But what you begin to realize is unhealthy people try to pull you back to unhealthy boundaries. And if you give in to that, it's going to make you sick again. It's going to make you more unhealthy again. And the relationship's then going to end up hurting you plus others. And so to get healthy and stay healthy individually means I have to work towards creating healthier relationships as well, which means going from unhealthy boundaries to healthy boundaries. And so if I really care about the person and I want a healthy relationship, then I'm not going to allow unhealthy boundaries to take place in this relationship. And so setting a boundary, though, for a person from complex trauma always feels like rejection, or you're doing something bad, or I'm judging you. This is punishment. And so boundaries is never perceived as coming from love. Boundaries is always perceived as criticism, as judgment, as punishment. And so for a person now to implement healthy boundaries, they have to be prepared for the fact that often the people they're setting them with are perceiving them not as a loving act, but as something very judgmental. And so it's really being able to go, no, I know my own motives here. I'm doing this because I want a healthy relationship. I care about this person. I want this relationship, but I can't, this relationship is never going to be good for me or them if it's unhealthy. So it's got to have some healthy boundaries if it's going to really be a positive thing in our life. Because if it doesn't, pretty soon it's going to drain both of us. It's soon going to be a negative thing that's going to create a lot of very kind of resentment, frustration, anger inside. That's just going to eat at me. Healthy boundaries are so necessary, and if they come from a place of love, that's what this is about.
I love that there's like a kind of like a core reframe in there, and what you wrapped up there is like the coming from a place of love. And so it's something that keeps us connected with others rather than separating
Yeah.
ultimately.
I would just a very practical application. So many people like grow up in like unhealthy families, complex trauma families. So there's unhealthy boundaries. So everybody dances around, let's say dad as the narcissist. So
Mhm.
dad's upset. Everybody runs around to make dad feel happy. Nobody ever says anything negative about dad, but everybody talks about each other behind their back. And so there's all these rules, boundaries, where dad gets treated one way, everybody else gets treated differently. And so when a person comes out of that and they get into recovery and they start getting healthy, then they go back to their family of origin, their biological family, and the family wants to pull them back to cater to dad, put your needs aside, make dad's needs everything. Don't worry about your own emotions, just take care of dad's emotions. And they go, no, I'm not willing to do this anymore. That's going to make me sick again. That's going to make me codependent again. That's going to feed into my shame again. and it's not respecting me. It's not respecting my needs. I'm going to stand up for me. And the whole family goes, no, 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 don't do that. You're going to get dad mad. You're going to cause conflict. Now there's going to be problems in the family. If you just conform to the old boundaries, everybody will be happy. And you go, no, I won't be happy. I'll be sick. And so the family is now scapegoating you as the problem. They're saying that you're the bad person that's causing all the frustration and anger. And you're going, no, I just want a healthy family. That's why I'm trying to change the boundaries. It's not that I'm trying to be a bitch or mean or judgmental. It's just, I can't recover in the old boundaries. I can't thrive in the old boundaries. And so this is where, to me, boundaries is such a practical aspect of recovery, because you can have all the concepts in your head and do all the internal healing, but boundaries is where the rubber meets the road now with relationships. And every relationship, you're looking for things that would pull it towards unhealthy dynamics, unhealthy interaction, that would make me small again, that would send me back to codependent, shame-based behaviors. And it's like, no, I got to implement all of these fine-tuning little things so I get healthier boundaries, which means healthier relationships, which means everybody starts to thrive better.
I want to touch on external boundaries more later, but I'd love to get maybe two little practical things from you with this example that you just gave. And so you're talking about the family unit as having this kind of their own system of boundaries. And then now you're learning healthy boundaries, or somebody's learning healthy boundaries and then coming back to that family system. How do you communicate to them and tell them that you're operating under a new system and that their old system is crap?
It's such a good question. So before I answer that, let me just say, just so people get a real clear picture, like if you look at your family, some of the unspoken boundaries that you just adopted is, we don't cry in this family. We don't talk about certain topics in this family.
Mm.
We don't share deeply or talk about the elephant in the room. So you begin to learn, okay, can't talk about this, can't show this emotion, got to respond to this person this way. When we go out in public, here's how we behave. And there's a whole bunch of rules, boundaries that go with that. And so you begin to realize, wow, my life was full of boundaries. Nobody ever defined them as that or talked about them that way, but that's what they were. And many of them were very much driven by shame, driven by a narcissist, and they're quite unhealthy. They're very codependent. Somebody always had to become smaller in order to make somebody else happy. So when it comes to, I want to go back to my family, still have a relationship with my family. Some people want to go back. So option one is they want to go back and just say, hey, this is a sick family, and I'm going to change things. Well, that usually never goes over well. And basically what I encourage people to do is don't start with that unless you have to respond to them kind of confronting you about why are you doing that? And it's like, well, because the old way's not good. Always do it respectfully. But to me, option two works better. And that is basically, I'm just going to start living by different boundaries. I'm not going to get drawn back into the old boundaries. And so, again, another thing that happens for many people once they move away from home is parents still want to talk to them every day. Mom wants a report every day on how they're doing. Mom wants input on every decision that they make. And if they go against what mom thinks, there's hell to pay. There's just like, those are all boundaries. And so you just begin to not call mom every day. You call her once a week. And if mom, what's going on here? And it's just politely, I just don't, I value you, but I don't really want to put this in my daily schedule right now. I've got so much on the go, and you give your explanation. So again, what I used to do with my wife when she would go to visit her family, and the tendency was to get drawn back into all the old family dynamics that you got to act a certain way, got to treat dad a certain way, is what I realized with that is there were different behaviors that would trigger my wife to want to act that way. So Dad would make a comment, and then all of a sudden, Kim would feel the need to go and make Dad happy, to avoid conflict, all of those
Mhm.
things. And so what I realized is she went with good intentions, with boundaries, but Dad had enough tricks up his sleeve that he could get her to forget those boundaries in a
Mhm.
heartbeat.
Mhm.
And before she knew it, she was back with kind of fighting, tr- getting all upset about all the old dynamics, but being drawn into the old dynamics. And so what I used to do before we would go on trips to visit would say, okay, if Dad says this, what are you going to do? Don't get drawn into it. Just walk into another room, go talk to somebody else. So it was kind of getting ready for all kinds of different possible scenarios and having plan A, B, C, D all ready to go in your mind so that you had your boundaries planned, but then you had responses to the things that trick you to change your boundaries, and you just live it out. And what happened with Kim's family is, like, her dad would get all flustered and mad and make all kinds of accusations at her. But after a while, he realized that wasn't going to get her to change her boundaries back to his. And he just started to respect her boundaries. And she didn't have to
Mhm.
go on any long preaches about why she was right, he was wrong. She just lived it out. And they gradually came around to accept that that was the way it was going to be.
I think like primary thing that I hear, well, there's two things that I hear in what you're saying, and that there's the showing them through our behavior versus our words necessarily, like kind of
Yes,
showing how we're acting in a different way over a period of time rather than demanding a change. And then the second piece is kind of working on your own internal resilience so that you'll be able to stay with these new behaviors as they learn
exactly.
to
Yeah.
adapt to you.
And I would add a third thing. So, just again, a very common example. So, my wife's family had 1,000 boundaries at Christmas time. So, Christmas
Mhm.
morning, we're going to do this. We don't do this until this happens. We don't do this until this happens. And it's got to be done exactly the same way. And there was rule upon rule upon rule. And to me, it just, I got married into this family, and I just said, this just takes all the fun out of Christmas. This just makes Christmas, you're walking on eggshells because am I going to break a rule? Is Dad going to get upset that I didn't quite do it right? And so what Kim and I did was we went to her family and just said, okay, we've got our own kids now. We want to start our own Christmas traditions. And so we're going to come and we're going to spend so many hours here with you, and we'll do some of your stuff. But we're going to be, and so it was like the worst part of the Christmas and their family was the beginning of the day, the morning. Everything had to happen at a certain sequence and all of that. And so we just said, we're going to have our mornings together. We'll come over for Christmas dinner. And we just avoided all of that. So it wasn't that we were coming out condemning and criticizing. There was
Mhm.
no point in that. It was, we came with a counter proposal that
Mhm.
said, we want to honor you, but we also need to take care of ourselves and honor our own little family. And they accepted that. And it just took a ton of tension away, a ton of frustration away. And so I think for people to realize that you do have agency when you're going back to a family that has a bunch of rules, not just to condemn the rules, but to propose better working that
Mhm.
would kind of meet them in the middle a little bit, that they would be more inclined to accept than just your way's wrong, mine's right. Too bad.
I like this. I feel this leads into really well. So thinking about preparation and behavior change and developing resiliency. One of the things that you talk about a lot is internal boundaries. And I sounds like internal boundaries are the way to develop all those or to start the path toward that. And so could you maybe just tell us quick like what you mean by internal
Sure.
boundaries?
So to me, internal boundaries are rules I make for myself about what I need to be healthy. And so for me, it's rules regarding my 12 needs. So I need to eat a certain way. I need to get a certain amount of sleep. I need to have a certain amount of exercise. I need to do certain routines and rituals every day to kind of get my soul in shape, to feed my mind, to connect with people. But what I realize is rules in and of themselves are necessary. Then I need kind of the willpower and discipline to stick to the rules. But for most people, those two things work most of the time, but there's still going to be days that willpower is not enough because my limbic brain is going to be in a ton of pain that day, a ton of stress that day, just doesn't feel like doing the internal boundaries, doesn't feel like stopping eating at one course and not snacking. It wants to snack because it's stressed out. So it doesn't want to just watch so much TV. It just wants to binge on TV and do nothing else. So basically, it's realizing that rules and willpower are necessary but not sufficient. And so it's what then causes me to not follow my internal boundaries. When is willpower not enough? Well, it's when I'm super tired, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm very angry, when my 12 needs aren't being met and there's a discontent and my brain is looking for a solution. It's going to go back to food. It's going to go back to sex. It's going to go back to kind of all the old things it used to try to solve them before. And so it's realizing that internal boundaries are absolutely necessary if I'm going to get healthy, but there's more than just setting them if I'm going to succeed. I think another way to look at it would be this. A child comes into the world and they basically have parents set boundaries for them. I'm going to get you up at this time. I'm going to feed you at this time. We're going to do this. They don't have any internal boundaries. They have all external boundaries. So if the child's in a very healthy home where parents have good routines, good meeting of the 12 needs, good daily habits, what happens over time is the child, as a limbic brain child, goes, I hate I got to do chores. I hate that I got to eat my spinach or whatever. But gradually they learn, wow, there's wisdom in those boundaries that mom and dad set. And they then incorporate those external boundaries as their own rules to live by. They make them internal boundaries. And now they want to follow those internal boundaries because they know it keeps them healthy. It's a healthy way to live. So what happens with complex trauma is you either get bad external boundaries that you then internalize. So I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to be irresponsible. I'm going to blame everybody for my problems. I'm not going to take ownership. I feel helpless. And so your internal boundaries are just not there or very unhealthy. And so that's why a lot of people do well when they go to a treatment center because they're back in an external boundary place where they're being shown how to live a healthy life. The rules are there. You got to get up at this time. You got to eat this. You got to go to these meetings. You got to whatever. And they do really well. The minute they get out of recovery, out of the program and off on their own again, and they don't have external boundaries anymore, they fail because they haven't incorporated those in as internal boundaries. And that's where some people then become institutionalized. They do great when they're in an institution where there's external boundaries and somebody else to enforce the boundaries, but they don't do well when they're on their own and they have to enforce their own boundaries. And so to me, part of maturity as a child to an adult is moving from somebody else enforcing external boundaries to incorporating those and enforcing your own internal boundaries. And that's the same in recovery for people coming out of complex trauma is you have to get beyond needing other people to enforce external boundaries for you to be healthy to the place where you can enforce your own internal boundaries.
And for people coming from that position where you've never had it enforced, or you're not able to do it yourself, like, are there steps or any sort of like I want to say that the easy, air quotes, easy process to get to that place where you can do that self-enforcement?
And again, this is where the rubber meets the road at a whole new level. So where I would start with people is, okay, let's take your 12 needs. Let's look at get a 7-day-a-week calendar laid out with by hours. Okay, how many hours do you need for sleep? How many hours, or where are you going to fit in kind of meditating? Where are you going to fit in exercise? What's your menu for the week? When are you going to do shopping? When are you going to get to a recovery-based meeting? So I want you to fit into that week, not just your job, not just sleeping, not just relaxed time. I want you to fit in everything you're going to need to have a healthy life and meet all your 12 needs. And then that's going to include beyond that your responsibilities. So if you've got kids, when are you going to connect with your kids, play with your kids? If you've got a partner, when are you going to connect with your partner and spend time with your partner? So you got relationships to manage, you got responsibilities to manage, you got your own personal life to manage. Let's lay that out on a schedule. How are you going to do that? And so that's just in and of itself is quite a challenge for people, because they just think enforcing these internal boundaries is just going to happen magically, that I'm going to wake up at 6 every morning. I'm going to eat a good breakfast. I'm going to meditate for a while, do my exercises, head off to my work. And they think, it's just going to be easy. And no, unless you plan for it, it's not going to happen. You're basically planning to fail if you're not planning. And so it's realizing that, okay, let's plan it. But then I go to, okay, what are you going to do on the days where you wake up and you didn't sleep well that night and you just say, oh, just another hour, that's all I would like? Or something bad happens and you have this big conflict, or there's stress at work, and all of a sudden you don't feel like doing what you normally would do. So boundaries are easy to implement, internal boundaries, when you feel like it. That's easy. The problem is the days you don't feel like it. And that's where you need a plan. How are you going to stick to these boundaries on the days you don't feel like it? And so that's where, to me, you got to get out of your limbic brain. And because the limbic brain only does stuff if it feels like it, and if it feels it's going to be pleasurable. You have to get to a point where I do this because it's healthy. I do this whether I feel like it or not. And that is moving to your cortex. And that becomes the key part, to me, in implementing good internal boundaries. Is you can't be limbic brain based. You got to be cortex brain based.
So part of it is like there's very much this structure, adding your own structure with the planning. But then also, I'm glad you added that at the end, the kind of preparing for contingencies, especially that contingency of, I don't feel like it, and how are you going to react and respond to that? I want to flip to the other side of that. So with enforcing, like adding discipline, for people who came from a more authoritarian or rigid or abusive environment where we have that inner critic who's just like, you're bad, you did horrible at that, you should have done better. How do you, well, when discipline is a 4-letter word,
yes,
exactly. How do you learn to have a healthy discipline?
Yes. Excellent question. So to me, there's a couple pieces with that. So the first thing that I want people to realize when they start to introduce internal boundaries into their life is, for many people coming out of complex trauma, what you're doing is introducing structure and routine. And to use structure and routine takes the fun out of life. You were forced to do chores. You were forced to stick to a structure and routine. It wasn't healthy for you. It was because mom was a neat freak or dad was a control freak, whatever. And so you have this resistance to structure and routine, and you just like to pride yourself that I'm spontaneous. I just fly by the seat of my pants. Structure and routine is for boring people. And so you got to reframe that and basically say, you got to do healthy things every day if you want to be healthy. And so this structure is just providing a way for me to do healthy things more easily, consistently. It's developing good habits. So part of it is reframing that. But then the second piece to me is, and I tell people, you're not going to do internal boundaries perfectly the first time. So you're going to get this weekly schedule all laid out. Don't expect you to yourself to do it perfectly the first
Mm.
time. And when you fail, don't let that inner critic say, you're a failure, so you can't do this, you're a loser. You got to have a ton of compassion and patience to let yourself grow. And so it's like, to me, asking or a child saying to their mom, I want to help you bake cookies. Okay, so that's got a lot of different skills involved in kind of getting flour, mixing ingredients, teaspoons, tablespoons, cups of milk, kneading it and stirring it and all of that. And so the child's not going to do it perfectly. Usually, if the child is helping, there's going to be a huge mess. There's going to be flour everywhere afterwards. And so if mom was to respond by saying, you're a loser, you can't do this, right? That would destroy the child. But if mom realizes it's going to take the child a while to get really good at using a blender, a mixer, measuring and all of that, and just allows a lot of patience and grace to that child, the child's going to become a great baker if that's the case. And so it's really realizing I'm allowing myself to grow into this skill set. And
Mm.
it's going to take practice. It's going to involve failure. I'm going to learn from each one. So I need a compassion to myself, not an internal critic, because that has never served well to make me feel motivated to want to do more, do a better job.
Could could you maybe speak more about that moving from like an achievement, perfectionism, failure-oriented mindset to maybe one of like learning? Like how can you kind of reframe out of perfectionism
Yeah.
into learning how to learn again?
I think, and I say this carefully, but I think a lot of people enter into recovery and doing boundaries, and without realizing it, they're really doing it out of a shame place.
Mm.
So I see how screwed up I am. I see how I'm failing in relationships. So now I got to prove myself that I'm better than this. I got to get healthy to solve all of these ugly feelings I'm feeling right now as a failure. And so it's very much shame motivated. Now there could be definitely a blend that there's also a very healthy, I want to get healthy, but there's usually always a shame component that's part of that. And so what then happens when you have a shame component is you often set an unrealistic standard for yourself. So I can't be human. I have to be this Superman perfect. And if I fail, I got to beat myself up. That's the way that shame tries to motivate. And so what you end up is really doing a shame type of cycle that actually feeds shame even more and sets up failure to happen. And so it's really realizing, hey, I'm human. I might be 50 years old, but I actually have the skill set to live a healthy life of probably a 3 to 5 year old. And so I got to treat myself like a parent should treat a 3 to 5 year old, learning how to do social interaction, learning how to take care of their home, learning how to develop healthy habits and routines. I need to give myself a lot of patience. I need to have a plan. I need to have accountability, but I also need a lot of patience because this is not going to be a smooth, steady growth process. This is going to be very up and down and messy. And so it to me, if people realize that the way shame shows up in recovery is to pounce on myself if I don't do it perfectly, and thinking that to be perfect means now I don't have shame. Now I'm not a failure. Now I prove that I'm good enough. The problem with that is, again, you set the bar too high and you can never
Mm.
attain it. So you always end up feeling like you're not good enough. So it defeats itself. So short answer to your question, Andy, is just look for those things that would indicate there's a shame piece in your thinking in this
Mhm.
process. And that's ultimately going to hurt you and defeat you. And so be able to say, hey, I don't need to be trying to prove I'm better. I don't need to be trying to gain anybody else's approval. This is where I am. That's okay. This is where I want to go. It's going to take me a while to get there. and I'm okay with the process. It's like a child learning to walk. They're not going to do it perfectly the first time. It's okay to stumble and fall. I accept that. And so it's accepting where I am, accepting the process. To me, that becomes such an important part of this.
I want to look at another side of the shame angle, and this is something that came up recently in a group that I was facilitating, where I'm not worthy to eat healthy,
Right.
to learn how to do art, to exercise my body. Like I'm not worthy enough to take care of myself in a way. And how, for somebody who's coming from a place where maybe like through codependence, where they're only looking outward and helping others, but for some reason that mirror to themselves, like they can't find the value to follow through
Right.
on healthy action.
Yeah. So let me give a couple pieces to this because I think this is such a key piece in what keeps people from implementing internal boundaries is there's actually a shame element that prevents them from doing it well. And they don't understand that shame element. And that's what you're really focusing on, which I'm glad you are. If I can expand on that for some, to me, complex trauma, a child's neglected, abused, abandoned, their needs aren't met. So they internalize that it must be my fault. I must not be good enough. So they develop this core belief that I'm not good enough. But then if you have a narcissistic parent and everything revolves around keeping them happy, then the child learns codependency, which is I'm not good enough, so I got to make myself smaller. I got to put my needs aside. I got to sacrifice. I can only be happy. I can't show any other emotions. So I got to become less and less human, and I got to be a clone of what the narcissistic parent wants. I got to think like them, feel like them, or else they're not going to be happy. And so what complex trauma does is it gives a shame message, but then it reinforces and creates deeper and deeper shame, which is a smaller and smaller me, which is no backbone. Now I feel guilty if I have a need. Now I feel guilty if I stand up for myself. Now I feel guilty if I take care of myself. I'm being selfish. All of that stuff comes into play. And so you lose respect for yourself. You don't stand up for yourself. You're not even aware of your own needs. So for a person now, if that's what's kind of drilled into you, gaslit into you is healthy, that's what love is supposed to be. That's how relationships are supposed to work. If you now come into recovery and they say you need to stand up for yourself and do a routine for yourself, that feels wrong. So it's not just that they don't feel worthy, it feels that's unloving. That's being selfish.
Yeah.
That's putting me ahead of everybody else. How can that be a good thing? And so what you got to do is relearn that love isn't me putting my needs aside and making somebody else's needs more important than mine. Love is your needs matter just as much as my needs. And so if this relationship is going to be healthy, we're going to have a 50-50 need ratio happening here. Otherwise, if it's out of balance, it's never going to be a healthy relationship. And so I think people can begin to realize that if they think of it that way, but then if they kind of transpose it to, if they were to look at a 2-year-old child and go, do they deserve to be fed? Do they deserve to be clothed? Do they deserve to have a good night's sleep? And they go, yeah, they do. So basically what I'm pushing people into a corner to see is you think everybody else deserves to have their needs met and that they should have a healthy routine and healthy. You're the only exception to that rule. Everybody else should have those things happen, except you don't think you're worthy. You're the only person that's not worthy. There's something wrong with that picture that all of a sudden you're the only person that's the exception to this kind of my needs matter just as much as anybody else's. So if people can begin to see that, they kind of see themselves as an exception. They would never want that for anybody else, especially
Right.
a child. Sometimes they can catch kind of that false dichotomy in their mind that's been created that they shouldn't get that themselves. Okay, so that's the first two parts, but then I would explore it into a third area, because I think some people say I'm not worthy when really they mean I'm afraid to stand up for myself.
Mhm.
And so I know I deserve to have my needs met, but I'm afraid to express my needs. And so
Mhm.
it's easier to say I don't feel I'm worthy of it because I don't want to admit how deep the fear is, or I might not even be aware of the fear. And so I think for many people, to get healthy internal boundaries means you have to put yourself out there, and that triggers fear. And that fear causes them to go, oh, I can't do that. And they look for an explanation as to why without acknowledging the fear. And so getting healthy internal boundaries always means walking through fear and saying, I'm not going to give into this fear. I'm going to do this because I know in my cortex that I matter. Even though my limbic brain right now is in fear and saying, no, I don't matter, I'm going to stick to my cortex.
Mm. I appreciate your answers. I always have five layers of depth and across five different categories of trauma healing. Um, something as you're sharing with the 12 needs, and earlier kind of you'd mentioned, you know, allowing yourself or letting yourself be that 3 to 5 year old. One of the things I'd love to get your feedback on this, so is starting to see your own body as your primary friendship, and then it's a friendship that, if you take care of it with the 12 needs, I'm going to clothe you, feed you well, give you movement, eat healthy. I think I said that already. Like, how do you see that? Is that a possible path, of kind of like developing this friendship, of seeing the body as this thing that it's going to be the closest friendship that you have for the rest of your life?
Well, get ready for another multi-layered answer. So, to me, part one, Western culture, of the 12 needs, they focused on the physical needs better than any other culture. But they've made it kind of the primary thing. Make sure you eat healthy, make sure you're dressed warmly, make sure you have a good house. And we've put a lot of emphasis on the physical need, often neglecting emotional needs and all the other needs. And so if you look at even introductory parenting material, you're bringing a baby home from a hospital. What's the focus? Make sure they're fed, make sure their diapers changed. Here's
Mhm.
what you look for, that there's a physical problem. So it's physical needs, physical needs. And now that's starting to change, but in the past, there was nothing about connecting. There was nothing about allowing your child to be authentic and nurturing them emotionally and accepting them, all of that. It was just make sure you meet their physical needs, get them in the best school, get them into sports, get them in all of that, then they'll be successful. So it was very lopsided. It was very skewed. Okay, so why I say that is on the surface, it looks like we're very tied into caring for our body. Complex trauma, to me, you lose touch of your body. And I think much of Western society has emphasized feeding your body, taking care of your body, but we have not listened to our body. And so, on one hand, our body's important, but on the other hand, our body is, and if you go into kind of Christian thinking, it's your body's your flesh. Your body's going to lead you into trouble. Your body, you get
Mm.
lots of pleasures that could be misleading. Your body's got sexual desires that you got to watch out for. Your body kind of is, you got to repress a lot of your bodily desires and urges because that's bad. And so it's almost like your body's a dangerous thing, a bad thing. Don't listen to your body. Just do the right thing. Just make sure you behave properly. And so we got a very mixed messages around the body. And then kids coming out of severe complex trauma, pre-verbal trauma, they store their trauma in their body. They disconnect from their body. They hate their body because of shame, because parents told them they were ugly, whatever. And so they don't even hear their body, listen to their body, know what they're feeling in their body. So it's a very, very complicated thing. And so to me, what I want people to realize is your body is actually the first thing that you receive that was there to teach you. It's not just a vessel to keep you alive and carry your soul. It's a wonderful participant in your life journey. Listen to it because it's going to tell you lots of things about your trauma, about what's happening in your world, about even your emotional world. Your body is constantly communicating with you, not just about medical, physical stuff, but about all parts of you. And so to help people with that, I want them to realize is I think the danger in much of Western thought has been we've separated the mind, the body, and the soul as three distinct entities. And what we learn in trauma and recovery is they're all connected. They all feed off each other, communicate with each other, are affected by each other. So we need to see them not as separate entities, but as units that are all interconnected. And so my body can help my mind. My body can help my emotions. Listening to my body can help my immune system, can help my central nervous system. Let your body teach you. And then take it one step farther. It's this. When a child, an infant, 2 days old, is crying its head off, is dysregulated, how do you regulate that child? Often it's through the body. You rub them on the back, you rock them, you soothe them, you pat them on the back, you sing to them, you take care of the needs of their body. So the body to me becomes a newborn infant shows us the body is a key part of emotional regulation. The body is a key part of helping that child learn to deal with life. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. I think a key thing that comes up from what you've said is just the word like nurturing of, we can nurture our bodies, nurture our emotions. And in a way, that's a lot of what you're doing here with these internal boundaries is learning how to nurture yourself.
Yeah. And I think just the flip side to be kind of cautious. So we live in this kind of magic pill recovery culture. So just do this one thing and then you'll be healthy. And so there definitely has been a movement of just get a healthy body, eat right, have this certain diet, sleep, exercise. That's the key to get healthy. And I go, there's a lot of value in that. I never want to minimize that, but don't put all your eggs into one basket
Mm-hmm.
and don't begin to prioritize the body above the emotional needs, the relational needs, the other needs of the body. They got to be all in balance. So that's just kind of the balancing truth that needs to be heard.
Yeah, I think you talked about the Christian perspective of there's a lot of things with the body that are either like bad or dirty. But I think there's another layer where that I was in most of my life where my body is a tool.
Yeah.
And it's just this tool for productivity, whether that's like being fit, looking good, being able to work long hours. And so moving from that tool perspective
Exactly.
into taking care.
Yeah. And I used to hear kind of the present, getting a present at Christmas, that the body's the box that the present comes in. So it doesn't have much value. It's just the container that holds the real stuff. And that was kind of how it was presented to you. And that's kind of that tool metaphor idea. But it's again, it's minimizing to a degree, though not overtly saying it, but it's minimizing the value of the body, the beauty of the body. And I think it's to reclaim that, not then make it the only piece.
I think you mentioned earlier, and I think part of what we've been talking about here. So before we shift, I'd love just to get your take on, it sounds like developing self-compassion and working with self-compassion would be such a helpful component for everything that fits here with the internal boundaries and the 12 needs. And so maybe for people like who struggle with self-compassion, what are some steps that you can begin to find that for yourself?
Boy, again, a multi-layered answer. So in my own life, what I realized in my teens, early 20s is I didn't have much self-compassion. I was a harsh disciplinarian of myself. I held myself to this high standard that had no give. And it was, looking back on it, was very fear-driven. It's if you let yourself away with something, that's a slippery slope. Pretty soon you're going to let yourself
Mhm.
away with everything and you're not going to care. And so you have to be perfect or else you're going to let yourself slide. And so you better be really hard on yourself if you ever dip below that line of perfection. And so that was one element. The second element was this sense of justice that was built into me. So if somebody commits a crime, they got to do the time. That's fair. That's just.
Mhm.
And so if you commit the crime, you got to do the time. And so if I fail, you got to punish yourself for a week. Oh, you got to be in the doghouse. You got to be hard on yourself. And it was like that sense of justice that you got to somehow pay for your guilt. You got to pay for failure before you let yourself out of jail. It is really was part of that. But then what I began to realize, so that was kind of the two surfacey things. What I began to realize though was how big the shame element was. And it was really the belief that I'm not good enough. So the only way I can be respected by others and be liked and be good enough is I got to be perfect. I got to please everybody. I got to do everything just right. That's the only solution to my shame. If I have a weakness, if I'm human, if I'm limited, if I'm not the smartest person in the room or the most capable person in the room, people are going to look down on me. People are going to laugh at me. People are going to judge me. That's all shame driven. That's a fear, a huge, huge fear that I'm going to be laughed at, looked down on, judged unless I'm perfect. And so what I began to realize is I don't accept my humanness. I reject my humanness and require
Mhm.
perfection. And when I realized that's not even possible. So if I don't start accepting that I'm human and I can't be Superman, I can't be perfect, I'm going to beat myself up for the rest of my life and it's going to be miserable. And so when I fail, it's not because I want to start down a slippery slope and see what I can get away with. It's because I'm human. And what can I learn from it? So instead of beating myself up, go, oh, okay, didn't quite get that right. What can I learn from that? That's okay. And so it was, again, reframing it, but to see how deep the fear was of being judged by others, being looked down on by others, that was really holding me in this prison. And so learning to accept my humanness was a key starting point for me. And one of the first indicators that I was getting it is when I could laugh at myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I kind of goof up a little bit. Yep, that's me. I do that. And whereas in the past, I'd just be horrified and beating myself up and feeling I have to hide out for a week and I can't face the public kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, that's what we do. And I think I needed a couple mentors in my life who modeled that.
Mhm.
So people that were deeply loved and respected. But I remember one of my mentors, absolute genius, brilliant, brilliant person. He came to a meeting one day, a black sock on and a blue sock on. Another time he came to a meeting, his shirt was buttoned up all wrong. And we pointed it out to him and he just laughed. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Straightens it all out. And it didn't faze him. And I went, wow, that is so amazing to be able to be human and accept it.
Mhm.
And so getting to that shame piece to me is really the heart of this. Then a fourth piece to me is just once I had children, children are often parents' best teachers because when my child was learning to walk, when my child was learning to color, they didn't color inside the lines perfectly. Didn't bother me at all. And I go, why? Why does that not bother me? If I was coloring and I colored outside the lines, I'd be mad at myself. Well, they're 2 years old. That's okay. They're human. They're learning. And I began to be able to reframe it through the eyes of a child and the grace and
Mm,
patience and compassion I give to a child. And to go, why can't I give myself that same compassion because I'm human too? So that those were all helpful for me. Um, so
mm.
I think you can probably add a few from your own experience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I really feel that you showed an example here of, if I were to tell you to lighten up, that there's a lot of like from this harsh seriousness to treating yourself with just a lighter and more levity,
Yeah.
and that grace that you're offering yourself.
Yeah. And one of the things that I
Yeah.
purposely had to do is so when you're controlled by shame and this kind of unrealistic standard that you hold yourself to, and it's not just performance on the job, it's in social settings, and so to me, I was kind of a serious mind to begin with, very analytical. And so I was very serious as a person. And so I had to purposely choose to go into social settings and do something a little bit silly, do something a little
Mm,
bit light. That was out of character. That was, ooh, now they're going to judge you. But I had to take kind of initiative to actually put my humanness on display. This not totally put together on display and be okay with that. And that was important for me just to be able to start to consciously do things that I knew I would never do normally in the past because that would have been taboo.
mhm.
But now I'm going to purposely go in and do something, say something that pushes the envelope a little bit, maybe. Yeah. So lots of
Mm.
different things people can do.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue as a transition point of, this putting yourself on display, being in relationship with others. We've been talking primarily about the internal boundaries, the relationship with yourself. And so could we shift to talking about external boundaries and how we use these in relation with another? And so, well, I'd love if you could kind of give us like an overview of what external boundaries are, but also just kind of knowing that a lot of times, I think many of us, like codependents and almost anybody, that instead of a boundary, a lot of times what we're actually doing is trying to control
Right.
another person's action or behavior. And so to make that distinction
Right.
in there as well.
So I always like to think of external boundaries as kind of the rules that make healthy relationships. And for them to be healthy, they have to be guided by love. And that's your needs matter just as much as mine. And so I'm going to treat you the way I want to be treated. That kind of golden rule type of thing. And so if I look at kind of our marriage, there's some hard and fast boundaries that there's no give on them. So honesty, we're not going to disrespect each other, we're not going to lie to each other, all of those different things. So that's kind of that black and white. This is what love looks like. If you're going to have a healthy relationship, you got to have an honest, open, respectful type of relationship. But then there's the give and take type of boundaries that come from your tastes and preferences. So I like action movies. My wife likes comedy, romantic movies. I like one kind of music. She likes another kind of music. So we got to live in the same house. How are we going to make that work? It's not my way or is right. Your way is wrong. Give in and do it. Watch only the movies I want. We got to find a compromise here that your needs matter just as much as mine. And so I'm giving some, you're giving some, but we're finding a middle ground that both of our needs are being met. But then I think that's kind of, to me, there's kind of two types of external boundaries. There's that very fixed, this is what love is, but then there's the tastes and preferences and how do you make a relationship
Right.
work boundary. But then I think to me, what's been really important in relationships is just that boundaries. Every relationship is different. So every relationship has the same general external boundaries. But when you fine tune it, So my wife's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. So how do we make that work? Well, I need alone time, so I need some boundaries that give myself some space, but yet I still need to connect every day with her, and yet she needs more connection than I do. So we got to find out, how do you make our two personalities work? And then, to me, what many people have to realize coming out of complex trauma is, a lot of people think love means no boundaries, that you just, whatever I want, you have to give into. And so it's realizing, no, two people connected to each other can't be connected 24/7. They'd wear each other out. You got to connect, but then you got to have some private space, some private time. You got to have your own life. You can't just be Siamese twins living together constantly. You got to figure out, I need some space right now, or I need connection right now. You need your own separate interests. I need my own separate interests, but we need joint interests. You need your own friends. I need my friends, but we need common friends. That's where the boundaries get really tricky. So two individuals, so you got to have boundaries to protect that, but two individuals living together and connecting, you got to have boundaries to make sure that happens, and protect that and make sure it stays healthy. And so there's a complexity to boundaries, as I hope what people are seeing, and it governs every aspect of a relationship, bottom line. And so there's certain parts that are going to be the same in every relationship, but there's going to be other parts that are different in every relationship, depending on personalities, needs, etc. So one other piece to this, so I was quite sick for several years. So all of a sudden, our boundaries shifted, where Kim was carrying 80% of the load and I was carrying 20% of the load. Now, we allowed that temporarily because we knew the sickness eventually was going to pass and we'd get back to 50-50. Because if that had stayed 80-20, our relationship would have become very unhealthy. And so I think for many people raising complex trauma, you put all your needs aside, took care of somebody else. So it was 80% what they wanted, 20% of what you wanted. That was what you were raised with, and that was your normal. And you come into a committed relationship and you gravitate to doing that again, to try to win them, to earn their love. And before you know it, you've got a resentment, like, why I'm always taking care of them and they're not taking care of me? Why am I always compromising and giving them what they want? They never compromise and give me what I want. And then you realize this is really unhealthy. But to correct that feels wrong. It feels weird. And so it's just realizing you gotta keep working towards, my needs matter just as much as yours. I want to be treated the same way that you want to be treated. That's the only way this is going to be healthy. And that's what boundaries is trying to define.
I'm trying to put my finger on a question here of how this kind of the distinction between sharing responsibility for needs versus using the other person to meet my needs. Kind of, are there ways that we can recognize and see that? And then also, how do we shift from me using you to meet my needs to trying to get to a place where we're sharing responsibility for needs?
So let me kind of start with a bigger picture that I hope helps. I think a lot of people in complex trauma, where their needs weren't properly met and they don't know how to meet their own needs, they're looking for a partner to meet their needs. And so to them, love is, you're going to meet my needs. Finally, I'm going to kind of have a mommy to meet my needs or a daddy to meet my needs. And so it's a relationship and attraction based on unmet needs. And that's ultimately really what codependency is. That's not healthy love, but that's where most people come from with complex trauma is, I need you. That's why I like you. That's why I want this relationship. I need you. To me, healthy is, I know how to meet 99% of my needs. I don't need you technically for most of my needs. I can live quite well, but I do need connection at a very intimate level. I need a companion, a soulmate. I need somebody that I can just share my day with and laugh with and have lots of common activities with. That's kind of the extent of what I need. And so it's two people that are fairly self-sufficient, attracted to each other, not based on needs, but based on we share a common passion. We share a common interest and core values. And we're probably better together than apart, or more effective. So it's a totally different attraction basis than the needs basis. But if that's all you've been raised with is needs based, that's what you think all relationships operate by. Okay, so let me go back to that. If you come out of that, what then happens? You get into a relationship, you now can weaponize boundaries and say, hey, I need my own friends. I need my own space. I need you to meet my needs. I'm setting a boundary with you. No, you're trying to manipulate and control them. And so if I can just kind of give an example, a more healthy way. So I've struggled off and on with depression and stuff for years, anxiety. And so if I come up one morning and I say to Kim, I'm really struggling with depression today, what she would say is there anything I can do to help you? So she's not trying to force a boundary on me. She's not trying to fix me. She is just saying, hey, we're a team. We love each other. You tell me what you would like me to do, and I will tell you if I'm okay with that. And so it's expressing a need, figuring out together what's best for the situation, what honors both of us and helps towards meeting that need, so that it's not using boundaries to try to control. It's coming, here's the need that's different, that's kind of messing up the way things were. We got to renegotiate and rethink what's going to be the most loving thing to do that honors both of us. And so if I sense Kim coming to me one day and saying, here's your boundaries for the day, and I go, basically what you're saying is I have to do this. Because that's what that boundary means to you, is I have to do this. And I'm at a point in our relationship's at a point where I can say, I'm not sure I have to do this. I know you want me to do this. I know why you want me to do this, but this isn't necessarily good for me. It's not necessarily good for you. This is you trying to get me to do either what you don't want to do, whatever. And so I'm able to confront that and say, here's what I'm willing to do. Here's what I think is really going on. And so I think most people coming out of complex trauma have almost an innate radar system that can tell when boundaries are weaponized against them to use them, and when they come from a place of love.
And what I'm getting from you too is that there's a lot of really developing a skill for communication.
Exactly. Another way that boundaries get weaponized is by narcissists. And so a narcissist will kind of be in a relationship and make somebody, they'll gaslight somebody, make them inferior, make them put their needs aside to take care of the narcissist. And that they're told that's being loving, that's being a good partner, that's being loyal, all of the kind of the indoctrination that goes with that. And so what happens for a person that finally realizes that they are being abused by a narcissist and they start to stand up for themselves and express their needs, is the narcissist will say to them, you're being a narcissist. It's all about your needs now. That's all you're talking about. And so you're trying to set healthy internal boundaries and stand up for yourself. And now you're being told that you're a narcissist. And why it gets confusing for people is because it feels narcissistic when you've suppressed your needs for so many years. To actually put your needs out there feels narcissistic. It's not. You're actually asking to be treated as an equal, but it feels different than the old way of repressed needs. And so when the person says you're being a narcissist, yeah, that feels like I am. Maybe I am being, and then you second guess yourself and go back to the old boundaries. And so it's really realizing that narcissists will use boundaries stuff against you. I thought you were supposed to be a loving person now that cared for the needs of others and wanted to be healthy. And then they'll tell you what healthy is as suits them. And you get all confused by that. And so it's really hard to learn healthy boundaries if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, because they will not allow healthy boundaries. They'll always twist them to make you feel like you're being selfish.
That actually is the direction I'd wanted to go for a second, was like, there's a lot of examples of unhealthy boundaries in society. And I was wondering if you could give more examples of overt or subtle manipulative uses of boundaries, or things that people might say or do that we could confuse, or that society or even religion would confuse and tell us as a boundary, but that is actually some form of maybe control or something else.
Yeah. So let me give you this as a bigger picture. It's always been fascinating to me that when you look at the 10 Commandments, which is kind of the basis of our law system, but kind of Christianity, Judaism, when you look at the 10 Commandments, what you find in and what was happening in the environment that day is it was all the elements of a Jewish wedding. And so you get the 2 tablets. And so a Jewish wedding, you'd put the vows of the person, one person on the one tablet, and you'd put the same vows on the other tablet. So each person would have a set of the vows. What are the vows? I will not lie to you. I will not cheat on you. Well, those sound like laws. Well, no, that's love. It's healthy boundaries about how to have a healthy relationship. So if you reframe laws and commandments and get away from, we got to keep these rules, to, no, this is really about love. And so the danger to me in religion is it gets focused on rules and misses that really, if they're not an expression of love, then you've missed the point. So all the emphasis back in times of slavery was slaves obey your master, slaves do this. And people came along and go, but the Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself. Treat them the way you want to be treated. So how can your interpretation of slavery be right when it violates that you're supposed to treat them the way you want to be treated? And then, all the people saying we're privileged, we're in the colonial system, we have good language, good jobs, good money, so we must be better than everybody. So let's go force that on everybody, and let's put indigenous people in residential schools. Let's take over countries. And you go, how can that be right to impose your lifestyle and morals on others when you're getting richer and they're getting poorer? You're violating love. You sound like you're doing all the right things. Then you come into the LGBTQ thing. Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong. So let's treat them as the enemy. And I go, but where's the love? Treat them the way you want to be treated. And so anytime you put emphasis on a rule that then causes you to not treat that person the way you want to be treated as an equal, the rules become more important than love. So then the rule basically is now doing damage. And so that to me is sadly what has happened, is for many people, boundaries becomes legalistic rules that now have to be enforced. And to me, boundaries are never just rules all by themselves. They're the embodiment of love. And if you lose the love piece, that you matter just as much as me, then there's a problem. And so what I think sadly has happened in the Western culture, when you look at the rich versus the poor, LGBT versus straight, all of that, there's this whole mindset that white people are superior, white rich people, men, women are inferior, and all of it violates love. But they've created a whole set of rules that all sounds good if you're a man that's white, because it supports the lifestyle you want, but everybody else suffers for it. And so to me, this is where boundaries can sound very moral, But if they violate love, they're very harmful.
And so with that, there's just a huge level of like mutuality. Of if I'm going to apply this against you, I need to be willing to have it applied
Exactly.
to me as well.
Exactly.
You mentioned enforcing, and I know in the past you've talked about love being an action, and we're talking about love and boundaries here. How, if somebody's violating a boundary, and if you're in a relationship, you don't want to lose the relationship, how does like different levels of enforcement look like, or what does different options of enforcement of a boundary look like when it's been not being respected or being violated?
Yeah, again, a wonderful question and multifaceted, but let me just give some examples. I think like there's an element, I remember finishing university, starting in the working world, and I'd go into a lunchroom and they're either telling dirty jokes or gossiping, saying all kinds of things. I just turn around and walk out. So I enforce the boundary by, I'm not going to be part of this. And so they go to lunch and guys would want to get hammered and no, sorry, I'm not going to be doing that. And so they gradually began to realize, okay, that's Tim, that he's not going to engage in this stuff. So there's a part to me of boundaries that you just live. You don't need to be carrying signs and protesting and doing all kinds of loud out there stuff. You just live it quietly, and others often see it, respect it, and that's okay. But there are times when you do have to say something and do have to confront something. And so I think that's kind of your nonviolent protesting against racism, against discrimination, all of the things that have been happening, just to say this is not fair, this is not right, we're not going to be silent, this is systemic, it needs to be confronted, this is the power sources protecting their own but not really caring about the people. So there's a place for outing the injustices that are happening, the wrong boundaries that are in place in society. There's if you look at a lot of conflict in relationships, it's because you violated my boundary. I am hurt. I am
Mm-hmm.
upset. You disrespected me. You lied to me. You cheated on me. And so it's basically conflict is saying something harmful has happened to this relationship that could hurt it. We need to resolve it so it doesn't keep happening. So we get back to healthy boundaries so that this relationship is protected and can flourish. So conflict is a way of sorting out boundaries. But again, people from complex trauma don't like conflict. And let's avoid
Mm-hmm.
that. Let's try to hint at boundaries. Let's try to get around to it another way. Sometimes you just have to do that. So I'm not looking for unnecessary conflict. I'm not looking to fight every battle, but there's some hills you have to be willing to die on, kind of thing. And so it's really realizing that conflict is part of boundary enforcement. But where this, to me, the sad part is a lot of people in unhealthy relationships, so abusive relationships, very codependent relationships, their needs aren't being met. They're being disrespected. They're being treated as garbage. They finally get tired of it and they start to speak up. The other person then either tries to twist it and make them the bad person, or the other person refuses to change, look at their stuff. So instead of enforcing the boundary, they just move the line in the sand and they go, oh, if you do that one more time, then I'm going to leave you. They do it one more time. If you do, and so really what the issue is not the enforcing of the boundary, is the fear of being abandoned if I enforce the boundary. And so you got to be able to get to the point where you go, I can't be healthy unless there's healthy boundaries. So for me to continue to allow unhealthy boundaries is going to make me sicker and sicker. So if the person refuses to change and adopt healthy boundaries, then I have to be able to leave that relationship. That kind of is the ultimate way of enforcing.
Mm-hmm.
That even becomes true with biological family. And this is where a lot of people struggle because they've got this built-in sense of loyalty to their family that you never turn your back on family. But if your family is so toxic that they are making you very sick, for you to not set a boundary and enforce it and even walk away from them for a while is keeping yourself sick. And so there's the extreme enforcement, which is this relationship's over. I'm done. If you're not going to treat me with respect, I'm not going to allow you to treat me with disrespect because I respect myself. And so it's what I want people to hear is people will treat you the way you allow them to treat you. And if you allow them to treat you with disrespect and don't set a boundary, then they're going to continue to treat you with disrespect. It's all on you. And you can't, if they're not willing to look at their behavior and change, why are you staying around? There's something else going on here. So it's your fear of being abandonment. It's a false sense of loyalty. It's guilt, whatever. But that's what you need to look at because boundaries mean nothing if they're not enforced. So if you say to a child, if you come in drunk again, you're out of this house, and they come in drunk again, and you don't kick them out, the child soon learns boundaries mean nothing. So no doesn't mean no. It just means keep doing what you're doing. And that's, to me, what happens with people in abusive relationships where they say, if you hit me again, or you treat me with disrespect again, I'm leaving, and then you don't leave. You just train them that boundaries don't matter. No doesn't mean no. And that's not a good thing to do. So at some point, all boundaries will get challenged, which then means you have to enforce them, which then can lead to they won't respect how you enforce them, which then leads to now I have to implement a consequence. And that's where many people struggle, is they don't have a problem setting a boundary. They do have a problem enforcing it, and they have a greater problem implementing a consequence if the person doesn't respect it. But if you're not willing to implement the consequence, don't set the boundary.
Would you be able to give maybe a few examples of what healthy boundaries look like, but then also what healthy consequences would look like if these boundaries aren't met?
Yeah, so just very one that I've heard many, many times from clients is they would talk to their mom, let's say on the phone, or they go visit their mom. And always within a few minutes to an hour, mom would start to take shots at them, put them down, criticize them, and they just sit and take it. And mom would often go on rants and just tear them apart, and they'd take it. And I go, why are you taking it? She's treating you with terrible disrespect. And if you were to ever do that to her, she would crucify you for being disrespectful. So why is it all right for her to disrespect you, but you can't disrespect her? That's a double standard. Shouldn't both? So I go, next time your mom starts disrespecting you, if you're on the phone, say, Mom, if you're going to keep talking to me that way, I'm going to hang up. I couldn't do that. And I go, why not? And then you explore kind of the underlying issues there. But if they get to the point where they go, Mom, if you're going to be disrespectful, I'm hanging up, and they hang up, Mom will quickly learn. If I want a relationship with my daughter, I better start being respectful. So another thing to me would be, and this is more of a compromise type boundary, but a lot of people used to get, mom and dad would say, come on over for a family visit. And that would be basically a whole day. And then as the day progressed, people got drunker and more obscene and unkind, and all kinds of hurtful stories would come out, etc. And so, but you felt obligated to stay the 12 hours. And I would go, why don't you just go and say, we're going to stay for 3 hours and we have another commitment to go to, and you set the boundary. That's a compromise type boundary. So that's another one. To me, so my wife and I have great boundaries around respect of each other. The only time those really get challenged is when we're angry at each other. So when you're in your limbic brain, who cares about boundaries? Who cares about filters? Let's just get it all out. Let's just say what we want. And the more hurtful, the better. And so it's realizing that boundaries are great when you're in a good headspace, but sticking to your own boundaries in relationships is challenged when you're in your limbic brain. And so a lot of people with kind of borderline personality type issues where they get triggered and they're made to feel stupid, not seen, not heard. They lash out. They say some really cruel, hurtful things to their partner. 99% of the time, they are very respectful to their partner. It's that 1% of the time when they're triggered that all disrespect comes out, respect goes out the window. And so that's when you have to learn to stick to boundaries. And that's in those tough, tough times when your limbic brain is fired up and triggered, when it's hardest to stick to boundaries around respect, boundaries around being gentle, loving, kind, all of those things. So take it further. So go back to early married life. So I would get home from work and Kim would already be at home. And so my first thing is I'd see mail on the table. So that was back in the day when you got lots of mail. And I would go and I'd start opening the mail. And Kim's wanting to tell me about her day. And she's getting all upset at me because I'm half listening and looking at the mail. And one day she got really upset and she said, "Why can't you just come and give me your 100% of your attention? The mail can wait. I need your attention. I need to know that you care about my day." And I went, wow, yeah, it would really be hurtful to have somebody kind of reading the mail, half listening. So it was, okay, coming home, you get attention. But then there was another thing. Some days I'd get home and I had been talking all day long. I had been listening all day long. I was tired. I didn't want to sit and listen to Kim. I didn't have the bandwidth left to listen to Kim. So I would say to her, "Could you give me half an hour just to go chill for a while? Then I'll come and I want to hear about your day." So what we did is you figured out boundaries. And then, so as an introvert, I have a pretty big bubble. I don't like when I'm tired, when I've kind of given all day and then I can't give anymore. I just need to rest. My bubble gets quite big. And even somebody being in the house, I'm hearing them and I go, okay, are they going to want to come and say hi or see me or talk to me? And it's like, I don't know if I can do that right now. So what Kim and I had to figure out is I need a lot of bubble time. But we need connection time. As soon as I get home from work, as soon as whatever, we get a break in our day, let's connect. Let's talk about how things are going. And then after we've had a real good connection time, 15 minutes, half an hour, we can go off and I can go watch TV for a while. I can go for a walk for a while. I can listen to a book, whatever. So it's balancing our needs as individuals versus a couple. And so it's being able to figure that out. Then early in marriage, Kim has a certain standard of cleanliness and orderliness in the house, which was pretty close to mine, but mine was a little more lax than hers when it came to making the bed, doing the dishes, all of that. And so it was realizing that we had to sort out what boundary are we going to be happy with when it comes to making the bed, putting dishes away, all of that kind of stuff. Who's going to do that so that the workload is balanced, so that it's not just putting all the work on you and I just sit around and watch TV while you're slaving away in the kitchen. So it again, I hope what people realize is there's just so many different pieces. Every aspect of life now has to get talked about, has to get weighed out as to your needs, my needs, what is balance, so that we end up with a happy working marriage. And then it goes beyond that. Kim, when we were first married, I liked to go to bed by 10 o'clock. Kim liked to stay up till 11 or 12. Well, how are we going to make that work? And so it was realizing, well, I got to get up at 5 to 6 in the morning and I need some sleep. So I got to get to bed at 10 o'clock. It's not just a preference. It's if I'm going to get enough sleep. So Kim said, okay, I'll go to bed earlier. I'll just kind of readjust and learn how to make this work because this is a priority right now. So there's compromise, there's discussion, there's give and take, there's all, it takes and that's why I think the first 5 years of a committed relationship just take tons of extra work, and it's sorting out boundaries. It's the dialogue, the necessary discussion, the give and take to figure out how to make all these boundaries healthy and work for the couple.
So there's a key point that you make in the lift program as well. You just mentioned the word preference, and that reminds me of, you talk about sometimes we come in and that sleep boundary or the cleanliness boundary that a lot of times we treat it as a moral, this is right and you were wrong, rather than recognizing it as a preference. I want to move into a little bit of kind of like our internal emotional state, our energy. And there's a lot of stuff for those of us with complex trauma. We grow up with false guilt over responsibility, blame and abuse around boundaries. Like, I was told while being hit, you made me do this, and this hurts me more than it hurts you. And so, and this is something I've seen with a lot of clients in Lyft as well, where you're hyper attuned to other people's energy, over responsible for anything that happens, especially if somebody's kind of like in any way pointing a finger at you. And so I have a few questions around this. Like, the first is like, what helps people, when you've grown up in this environment, what helps people begin to separate what's theirs and what's not?
Again, wonderful question, Andy, and such an important question to sort out because bottom line, what happens in complex trauma is you are made to feel responsible for more than you actually are responsible for. So you're not just responsible for yourself and your decisions and your emotional expression. You're made to feel responsible for dad's emotions, for mom's emotions, for their responses. And that's not true. And so an important part of healing and growth is learning where I end and you begin, and my responsibility ends with my self. I'm not responsible for you. Now there's a certain caveat you got to add here that you got to be careful because so when Kim would see that I'm struggling with depression, she doesn't just go, I'm not responsible for you. Too bad. See you later. It's, I care for you. There's a responsibility of love, not of ownership, that I want to be helpful, but it's not on me to totally fix this. So I want to be of service, but it's caregiving versus caretaking. Caregiving is you have a need, I want to be of help, but you have to do your part. I can't just fix you. I can't do it for you. Caretaking is you have a need. I want to run in and fix it all up, and it's all on me to do it. And so it's really being able to realize that what happens in them affects me, but it's not my responsibility. So so if I walk into a room and somebody's really angry and you just pick up that energy, I have two options. I can turn around and walk out of the room and go, I don't need to deal with this right now. I don't think they're in a place to even talk about it. So I'm just going to stay away. So I'm going to kind of increase my bubble right now with this person, which is grow the boundary. Or I could go to that person and go, like, you seem really upset. Is something going on? And then based on their response, I can go, can I help? Or I could say, okay, I hope you can get it sorted out. See you later. And quickly sort out in that moment whether or not I should engage or stay disengaged. What can happen when I go, is something going on with you, is they can try to put it on me. And that's where people can get confused and that's where you have to be able to say, hey, I own that maybe I did some stuff that upset you. And I own that part, but now it's on you as to what you do with your anger. That's not on me to fix your anger. That's on you. So again, It's those very important distinctions between me versus you, my responsibility versus your responsibility, what my love for you causes me to become engaged in your needs, and where I disengage from that and say, no, that now is on you, that only you can do that for yourself. And that takes time to learn. You're not going to get that overnight or from a textbook. That's gradually, you just work at figuring that out.
I think you kind of answered this, but then the follow up with that is that when you're talking about the responsibility, kind of a lot of times in a spiritual or psychological environment, there's this push towards, we often we want to blame and we want to project. There's that default of like, I don't want to feel these emotions, so you're bad. It's like we ventilate it out into somebody else. But and so there's this push kind of for this like 100% responsibility.
Yes.
And so if I'm feeling it, it's my responsibility. How, for somebody who has kind of this sympathetic nervous system attunement, do you kind of respond to the my responsibility, your
Yeah.
responsibility, 100% responsibility? How do you start to tease that out?
So to me, there's two pieces around that. To connect with somebody and have an intimate connection with somebody means I'm engaged. But I can be engaged with somebody, but be disengaged from some of their emotional world because I can't fix that. That's not my responsibility to take care of. So I'm engaged as far as being open to them, being vulnerable to them, sharing with them, but I'm not engaged in the sense of becoming responsible to do their life for them. So another way to look at that is through the lens of locus of control. So external locus of control basically is everything that happens to me is because of outside forces, fate, God, other people. I blame somebody. Internal locus of control goes anything that happens to me is primarily because I have agency to make decisions, to set goals, to have values, to make choices. It's on me if I get healthy. It's on me how I respond. That's internal locus of control. So if you look at an infant, they have total external locus of control. They have no control over their lives because they can't meet their needs. They don't have any agency. They're totally dependent on external locus of control. Others must take care of them. It's all externals. But part of growing up is you move to internal locus of control where now I'm a mature adult. I can move out. I can take care of myself. It's on me whether I succeed or not. Yes, there's external influences, but I always have choices. I always have agency, internal locus of control. So what happens to people with complex trauma is often they get stuck in external locus of control. I'm helpless. I can't fix this. I don't know what to do. It's dad's fault. It's the world's fault. It's God's fault. It's out of my control. Then they come into recovery and now they try to outsource their recovery. You got to fix me. This program's got to fix me. This therapist's got to fix me. God's going to magically fix me. I'm looking for a silver bullet that's going to fix me. And they're still operating out of external locus of control. And it's realizing, no, that healthy growth is and maturing is I'm moving towards internal locus of control, that I'm responsible for me and I have agency. I have choices. I always have some choices. It's not on others to make those choices for me. It's not for me to make choices for others. I have to be responsible for me. That is such a key shift internally for people to go from that external locus of control that then wants to outsource everything to have everybody else fix it, to this internal sense of agency, responsibility for me and not for everybody else. That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that actually answers the next question I had here. I'm going to state it still, just to see if you have any changes or caveats. But the question I had here is, how can someone with trauma begin to feel safe holding their own energy in a room without collapsing into others' needs or
Yeah.
moods?
And that's, again, such a Wonderful question, Andy. Because what happens with complex trauma for many people is you're fawning to survive means you become what others want you to become. You become hypersensitive to the energies of other people, to the moods of other people, to the thinking of the other people. Then you conform to that like a chameleon, and that's how you'll survive. You will become a clone of them to be accepted by them. And so you don't stand up for yourself ever. You don't be authentic ever. You don't say, this is who I am, and put yourself out there, because that would be judgment. That would be punishment. That would be disaster. That would be rejection. So fawning is your ultimate survival skill. So it's important to realize that that means, therefore, you have no boundaries. You accept whatever the other person's boundaries are for you. And so to get healthy is basically saying, I need boundaries for me, which is the opposite of fawning. And that feels so wrong. That feels so scary, because now I'm pretty sure I'm going to get rejected and judged, which you might. But to move now into a healthier place, most people can't start to develop authenticity and boundaries unless they feel safe. Because if they feel unsafe, they just go back to fawning. That's their survival skill. And so if they go into a recovery group, let's say, and there's a strong personality in the group, and all of a sudden they don't feel safe, it's really, really hard to set boundaries in that moment, because everything in them is pulling them back to fawning. Keep the peace, do whatever you have to do to please that other person. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. And so for many people, it's realizing that if I'm in a group of 10 people, I don't need all 10 to be safe. They can be relatively safe, but I need one or two solid, safe people that are kind of my rocks. That helps me not give into the pressure of the not so safe people. And so it's really realizing kind of attachment theory, that a child can live in a dangerous world and feel safe because they have mom and dad as solid rocks. Mom and dad have their back. Mom and dad are going to be there to help them if they're in trouble. So I need kind of a rock and a harbor is what come out of attachment theory. And I think it's so important for people. But then secondly, I need to create a sense of safety for myself. And so part of my boundaries are, I need daily safety. I need some alone time away from people where I can just relax. I can do what I enjoy. I can feel totally safe. I need at times the ability to visualize myself in safe spaces that help me get to safe feelings faster. I need to feel safe in my own body. So there's many, many elements to building a sense of safety, from just internal work that you can do with yourself, to a rock, harbor, people in your life, to gradually feeling strong enough in yourself that, hey, you can be unsafe, but I don't have to give in to you. But that's going to take time to build that type of strength and ability to be able to kind of withstand that. But I think it's important to highlight that for many people coming out of fawning survival skills, which most with complex trauma do, this safety feeling is going to be super challenging. And when they're in social environments, their tendency is going to go back to fawning, not to setting boundaries for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a while. And so to just build in gradual increments, little strength steps to increase your sense of safety, to say, hey, that's their crap. I'm not going to take it on today. Thank you very much.
Right.
That kind of internal dialogue.
Yeah. How, with building that safety, kind of is like role playing
Yes.
something that you've encouraged with people before,
Yes.
like practicing boundaries with safe friends, or
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done with role playing with people is, so you're going back to a family get together, and you know that uncle's going to be there that's always telling stories about you or saying little shots at you about your looks, or somebody else is going to be there. So let's role play that. And then what are you going to do if dad says this? What are you going to do if mom says this? So that's, or you're going to go to a social setting and there's going to be this gossiping lady or this negative Nancy there, this super critical person. How are you going to kind of work your evening to either avoid them, to not engage, or if they try to engage you, to keep it on a superficial thing and just role play so they kind of can practice ahead of time some skills to create safety with unsafe people.
Yeah, I feel that we've kind of turned full circle here with that there's some element of
Yeah.
preparation and planning that could really go a long way in helping with both internal and external boundaries.
Yeah, and I think just sadly a super common thing for many women is they go to recovery meetings and they get all these guys ogling them and trying to date them and do pickup lines on them and giving them all this unwanted attention. They got to be prepared. How am I going to deal with that so I feel safe in recovery? Or you have somebody that's Black and they're going to a predominantly white recovery meeting where they know there's a couple racist people that really look down on Black people. What are you going to do to kind of prepare yourself for going into that environment? And it's because you're not just going to get it in a recovery meeting. That's going to be your culture and you can't run away from that. You got to learn tools to manage that and keep yourself safe within that. Yeah, just tons of practical outworkings of this safety thing.
Well, I feel like we could go for another 2 hours on this. Boundaries is such a complex topic. But before we wrap up, for somebody who's listening who might feel overwhelmed and didn't grow up in a family with healthy boundaries or knows how to implement them necessarily, what would you want them to hear?
I think what I would want them to hear is if you look at the average child in a healthy home, I think part of what growing up is that you're spending 20 years learning healthy boundaries. You don't learn them in year 1 or year 2 of childhood. There's so many, they're so complex that it takes 16 to 20 years to learn them. So be very, very patient with yourself. This is a slow learning process. And I think to me that if people just kind of realize that, yeah, these are super complex, you don't learn this overnight. And much of it you learn by lengthy discussions, trial and error. And so you got to be very patient with yourself. To me, that's just absolutely fundamental. And I think for a lot of people, they go, I'm 50 now, like, what's the point? And I go, well, you can stick with the old boundaries. It might seem easier, but it's going to lead to a very unsatisfying life. Learning new boundaries that are healthy might seem like a lot of work and you might get a lot of opposition initially. If you stick at it, it is worth it. It does lead to health. So you're never too late to start, and it's always worth it to start.
Yeah. And I can validate that with my own experience of just in the last 2.5 years, noticing the degree of sanity and health that's been afforded to my life by being able to set boundaries and being better at setting and enforcing boundaries. And so I want to thank you, Tim, both for your influence for me and also for today, for your clarity. Obviously, there's a lot of heart that you offer in this, and just your years of walking this road with people. And for those listening, if this resonated, you're not alone. Setting boundaries is not a betrayal, it's an act of love. And the first person that we learn to love this way is ourselves. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.